She was an orphan girl, hungry and abandoned by fate, forced into a marriage with a man as poor as herself. But what no one knew was that behind his tattered clothes and humble smile, he was hiding an empire worth billions. And when the truth surfaced, it wasn't just her life that changed, but the entire village's destiny. In a small, dusty village on the edge of a forgotten road, lived Alia, a girl whose life seemed nothing more than a cruel punishment written by fate. Orphaned at the age of 9 after losing both her parents to an epidemic, she had been tossed from relative to relative like an unwanted parcel. Her uncles and aunts kept her for a few months, used her for house chores, and then sent her away when her presence felt like a burden. By the time she was 16, Alia had grown used to sleeping on thin mats, eating scraps after everyone else had dined, and hearing words sharper than whips: "Orphans are cursed, she brings misfortune, no wonder her parents died early." She didn't cry anymore. Her tears had dried up long ago, replaced by a quiet resilience that gave her face a haunting calmness. Despite the harsh treatment, Alia worked hard, helped in fields, washed clothes, and cared for children who weren't hers. Yet, no one saw her worth. When she turned 18, her guardians, an uncle and aunt who cared more about reputation than compassion, decided it was time to get rid of her. In their eyes, an unmarried girl, especially an orphan, was a burden and a source of shame. But who would marry a girl with no dowry, no family, no name? Days turned into months, and with each passing proposal, rejection followed. Men wanted wealth, land, cattle, or at least a respected family background. Alia had none. Her uncle grew impatient and, after long whispers with the village elders, struck a deal. He forced her into marriage with Imran, a man as poor as the soil they walked on. Imran was known in the village as the odd one, quiet, reserved, and living in a broken hut at the outskirts. His clothes were faded, his shoes worn out, and he barely spoke to anyone. People mocked him, called him useless, and gossiped about how he had no land, no cattle, and no family. Two beggars marrying each other, the villagers scoffed, what a perfect match. For Alia, the news hit like a storm. Marriage was never her dream, survival was. Yet now, she was being given to a man who seemed as powerless as herself. She resisted, begged her uncle, pleaded with her aunt, but her cries went unheard. "You are lucky anyone is taking you at all," her uncle barked. And so, one hot afternoon, without music, without joy, and without family blessings, Alia was wedded to Imran in the simplest ceremony anyone had seen. The villagers laughed, some pitying, some cruel. Alia, dressed in an old borrowed dress, sat quietly, her heart numb. She looked at her new husband, tall, humble-eyed, with rough hands like someone who had labored long. He didn't look at her much, nor did he say a word. That night, when she stepped into his broken hut, she realized she had not married into a better life but perhaps into deeper poverty. The roof leaked, the kitchen was bare, and there was only one thin blanket on the floor where he gestured her to rest. But what surprised her was his voice when he finally spoke: "I know this isn't what you dreamed of. But I promise, as long as you are with me, you won't be treated as a burden." His words were gentle, sincere, something she hadn't heard in years. For the first time, Alia felt a flicker of warmth, though she didn't know that hidden behind his gentle eyes was a secret larger than life. The days that followed were not easy. Alia woke before sunrise, cooked with whatever little grain they had, fetched water from the well, and worked alongside Imran in the fields they rented. Sometimes they ate only once a day, sometimes not at all. Yet, strangely, the bitterness of hunger felt less when Imran shared it with her. He never raised his voice, never mocked, never treated her as less. When she faltered carrying a heavy bucket, he would wordlessly take it from her hands. When she stitched his torn clothes, he would thank her as if she had given him a gift. Slowly, a quiet companionship bloomed between them, like a small flower growing in cracked soil. The villagers, however, never stopped taunting. Women mocked Alia: "So this is the life of the orphan bride, carrying mud instead of jewelry." Men jeered at Imran: "You can't even feed yourself, how will you feed a wife?" But Imran ignored them, and slowly, Alia learned to do the same. At night, under the leaking roof, she sometimes caught him staring at the stars with a faraway look, as if lost in another world. Once, she asked softly, "What do you dream of when you look at the sky?" He smiled faintly. "Of a day when no one has to beg for dignity. A day when people will see beyond torn clothes." His answer confused her but also stayed with her. Months turned into a year. They had no riches, but they had laughter in small things. Imran would surprise her with wildflowers, and she would sew patches on his old shirt in bright colors. Alia began to realize that wealth was not only measured in coins. Yet, deep within, a storm was brewing. Because Imran was not who he seemed. Occasionally, Alia noticed strange things. Once, when she was cleaning, she found a silver pen in his box, something far too expensive for a poor man. Another time, a wealthy merchant came secretly at night, and she overheard him addressing Imran as, "Sir," before quickly leaving. When she asked, Imran dismissed it lightly. "Just an old acquaintance," he said. But his calmness only deepened her curiosity. Then one evening, as they sat by the fire, Imran looked at her with unusual intensity. "Alia, if I tell you something one day, will you trust me?" She frowned. "I already do." He smiled but said no more. Little did she know, the walls of lies and secrets around Imran's life were about to crack, and when they did, her world would never be the same again. The revelation came not like a whisper but like a storm. It was on a day when the village was buzzing with the arrival of strangers, sleek cars rolling on the dirt road, men in suits stepping out, carrying briefcases. The villagers gathered, their mouths wide open, as the convoy stopped right outside Imran's hut. From the cars stepped men who looked like city officials, and they bowed their heads in respect as one of them said, "Sir, the board is waiting. We cannot proceed without your approval." Gasps erupted. "Sir, approval." All eyes turned to Imran, who calmly walked out of his hut, no longer hiding. Alia's heart pounded as she watched. Imran's posture changed, his quiet demeanor now carrying authority. He turned to her gently, "Come with me." Confused, she followed as the villagers whispered furiously. The officials explained, in front of everyone, what no one had ever imagined: Imran was not poor. He was the heir of one of the largest business empires in the country, a billionaire who had walked away from wealth years ago. He had chosen to live simply, away from greed, searching for something money could never buy: genuine love, trust, and companionship. Alia was stunned, her world spinning. The man she thought was as poor as her, the man she had cooked lentils with, fetched water with, starved with, was in truth richer than all the villagers combined. Anger, disbelief, betrayal, relief, all crashed inside her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Imran looked at her with deep sorrow. "Because I needed to know, if someone could love me for who I am, not for what I have. The world bows to wealth, Alia. But I wanted someone who would see me, not my money. And you did." The villagers who once mocked them now bowed their heads in shame. Those who had called Alia cursed now envied her. But Alia didn't care for them. She stared at Imran, tears streaming down her face. His secret was heavy, but his reason was pure. In that moment, she realized, she hadn't fallen in love with a billionaire. She had fallen in love with the man who shared her hunger, her burdens, her laughter. The wealth was only a shadow, the man was real. And now, the world would see him too. Imran did not abandon the life they built. Instead, he brought Alia into his world of riches with the same humility he had carried in poverty. They moved to a grand mansion, yet Alia insisted on keeping their old blanket, their old clay cups, as reminders of where they began. Imran introduced her to business partners, and she stood by him, no longer the orphan girl but a respected wife, dignified and strong. The same villagers who once mocked her now sought her help, and she gave it generously. Schools were built in the village, wells were dug, and widows and orphans received support. Alia never forgot the pain of being unwanted, so she became the voice for those who had none. But above all, their love remained the same. In the grand dining hall, sometimes they would still sit on the floor, eating simple lentils, laughing about the days in the leaking hut. Alia once asked, "Do you regret hiding who you were?" Imran shook his head, "No. Because if I hadn't, I would never have found you, the one who loved me before the world knew my name." Her story spread beyond the village, told in whispers and later in newspapers, the orphan girl who was forced into marriage with a poor man, only to discover he was a secret billionaire. But for Alia, the true miracle was not the riches. It was that in a world that had abandoned her, she had found a partner who gave her not just wealth, but dignity, love, and a place she could finally call home. And whenever she stood at the balcony of her mansion, watching the village children run freely with new books and bright smiles, she whispered a silent prayer: sometimes fate hides its blessings in the poorest disguises. From an orphan girl with nothing, to the wife of a secret billionaire, this story will touch your heart. Don't just watch, be part of the journey. Like if you believe in miracles. Share this story to inspire someone who feels forgotten. Subscribe to Kindness Vibes for more emotional folktales that prove love and kindness can change destinies.